Thank you for listening to the Allender Center podcast. I'm Dr. Dan Allender.
And I'm Rachel Clinton Chen. We're fiercely committed to providing hope and healing to a fragmented world.
And restoration for the heart.
Thank you for joining us. Let's get this conversation started.
The fall has begun, and as we enter into the complexity of this unique fall with COVID-19, fall with a highly politicized process of an election, it's going to be a very interesting end of the year. And one of the places that these days have as great an effect on as any other, it's marriage. And so we're going to be doing some work over the next, number of weeks on this category of marriage. But before we get into it, I want to underscore that this is for everyone, whether you're single, whether you're a single parent, whether you are in the middle of about to be married, just married, been married for 40 or 50 years. The fact is, there is someone in your life who is married and needs to have both wisdom and engagement, especially in this era, to live well. And I am privileged to be with my beloved wife. So Becky, as you and I begin this process thinking about marriage, I want you to begin by talking about what it has been like for 5 months, pretty much for me to have never been gone. I'll just say, I remember the day that we were in New Zealand over a decade ago when we had been together for 50 days in a row, 50 days without travel, without interruption. And I said to you...
Well, we were traveling together.
We were. But
on a motorcycle.
Yes. But I mean, before that, we almost all of our marriage, there have been periods where I don't think we'd ever been together 50 days in a row.
No.
And in that, I said to you, isn't it unbelievable that we've been together 50 days? Do you remember what you said? Because I remember exceedingly well.
I think I do. I think I said, yes, I'm aware of that because it's a lot easier being with me than with being with you.
Yes. I remember the pause, even on the mic, you just paused. And there, I expected you to be so thrilled as I was to be with you for 50 days in a row. And it was very apparent that being with me is different than being with you. And I think that's where I want to begin to say, we've been together now 5 months, if not longer, without a single day of travel.
You were gone 6 days. You should have been gone 7 days. You came home a day early.
Right.
I was afraid you would come home a day early. I loved that you were having fun fishing with Steve in Montana, but the last 3 years you've come home a day early. So I was pretty excited that you would kind of come home a day early. Not. But it's been so good, actually. That didn't sound like I've loved having you around. It was, it's been really, really sweet.
Well, it's been different than either of us would have ever expected. And it does not take us far to say no one anticipated what we have all gone through since, for us, early March. And in that process of quarantine, of missing our children, of missing particularly being with our grandchildren, there are so many elements of disruption and loss and struggle that I think is true for us and certainly true for many others. But to say what beyond the obvious of being together a lot, which as I've heard a number of couples say, it feels like though they're together, they actually have less to talk about because they're sharing so much of their own common space and time together. And I think we've had moments of that, but just the reality of being able to go, being together is causing for many couples more conflict, more struggle, more loss, etc. And in that, we're seeing, at least even for ourselves, the severity of our day exposes the fragility that we've been able to ignore by the other means by which we've lived. And so how have you opened the door to see some of the fragilities that exist in your marriage?
Well, I thought we were going to start out with the good things about our marriage, the fragility. I'm not even thinking of one other than I'm cooking a whole lot more than I used to have to do. And it's kind of a big production every day.
I know how irritated you get when I ask somewhere around 1 o'clock, what's
every
for
day,
dinner?
what's for dinner? Yeah. But on the other hand, we're sharing grocery shopping together. I mean, the first month, our children went shopping for us. And I have to say, I think in the beginning, we were very much aware of COVID through our children and their understanding of a pandemic in ways that a lot of our peers weren't. And then our we were just aware that a lot of companies, Microsoft, Apple, Amazon, a lot of these tech companies had in April had canceled everything until the end of 2021. So in some regards, I think we were over aware of the long haul than a lot of the country was.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would just say that I'm aware there are so many more losses that I would not have experienced before.
Yeah.
And as I said, not being able to see our children other than outdoors with masks on 6 feet away. I mean, one of the first things we did when we got a chance to be with them is we put on our motorcycle gear, including our helmets, and wrestled with and played with our grandsons. So, I mean, there are ways to make a way around it, but everything feels laborious, time consuming. Just having a meal with having our kids outside and grandkids. It's, as you said it, it's a freaking production that takes so much time to prepare, to serve, to clean up. And by the time all that's done, I'm finding I have less energy. I think that's another reality is I'm more exhausted and there's less to give. And less presence from others to actually receive.
And again, I'll have to just give you a picture. We have chosen not to allow anyone into our home. And so to serve a meal is a lot of taking of trays to the patio and then having one family on one side and us on another. And I don't have my daughters or daughter-in-law in the kitchen helping me. And so it's just very, very sad, actually, in many regards.
Well, when I think of there are more losses, again, more time sometimes means just the awareness. There's not a lot to be said. More losses, certainly of contact and convenience. There's so little control over the things of, well, just the big events that we would have been part of this summer. Weddings, even a funeral, and just the losses.
Vacations, yeah. So,
and then when you add that everything takes so much longer to get done. And because I spend a long time on Zoom each and every day, there is a kind of exhaustion that comes by looking at a screen, two-dimensional, trying to read faces. Again, nothing that's new for you hearing, other than just to say, what's happening for you as a person and as a couple as a result of more losses, more exhaustion, and certainly, I'd also add, more fear. Like my dream life is a whole lot more I will say, troubled than it used to be. And with death, suffering, illness, playing a far more central role. So the issue of jobs, health, finances, literally all the means by which I would have normally used to soothe myself, just going to our local bookstore, hanging out, picking books up. Very seldom do I buy books in that place. And yet it would be a place I would soothe. Going to our little downtown would be one of those places, just going to have coffee, sitting with friends. None of that bears the same opportunity for care, contact, and some level of control. All that has to have an effect on marriage. So we're already seeing in the culture that domestic violence is rising. We're seeing marriages that were probably held together by a thin means anyway, coming unraveled. And I think even strong, good marriages are having to tend to their own lives in a way that they couldn't or didn't need to do beforehand.
I think with the busyness of your travel and going to the school each day on the ferry and returning later and just you've always traveled for 44 years I've known you. You've always taught and you've always left the home and gone to the airport, and the rhythm of being busy and having a life that was apart from yours is something that's as familiar as the sun rising every morning. So the fact that we're together, neither one of us are leaving, it's a tremendous change for both of us. And without Zoom, it would have been, I don't know how we could have done it, because Zoom has allowed us to continue with yoga classes or our training for warrior classes and just connection. So it's given me such great, just appreciation for marriages of past before technology.
Right, indeed. And so when we think about the realities that people are facing, and if we can just say those categories, more time together does not mean more intimacy. It could, but for many, it actually exposes a degree of the absence of real life and passion. So much of life is lived often outside of the home that to be together for very extended periods of time, I hope for you and for all, that it's actually awakening, bringing more data before us. But we'll get to that later. Certainly more losses, more exhaustion, more fear. And if those are true, then it has to have some level of debris. And at least for me, I'm already a pretty solid introvert. And it's easy for me to go internal, to go to my books, to go to my writing, to go to other labor. And in one sense, just to use this period of time to cut off. And I have found even between us that it requires some degree of effort to say, let me get out of my own inner world and step into a conversation, to a walk, to being able to sit on the porch together and begin to engage. So that temptation, I think, for many people, and therefore for many couples, is to find what has worked for you in the past and then extend it even further, because we live in such extremity. And so my own isolation is, I think, a factor I've been aware of, and you've actually said a number of times, I need you to come sit on the porch. Don't eat your lunch alone. Come outside, let's sit for 10 minutes, take in some sun. And that's been really important to, in one sense, have you name what I've done in many ways to isolate myself from the craziness of where we currently are.
Yeah, well, I don't think you've ever had the opportunity to actually notice nature as much as since with this somewhat house arrest, garage arrest, yard arrest, neighborhood. I think the opposite of Zoom and technology, it's very important to pull both of us, but you in particular, to say, hey, sit here, just eat. Don't do anything but eat and look at the sky. Just important for you to not just be the workhorse sort of guy that you've been, your head to the computer, whether you're on the plane or at your desk. So yeah, I try and pull you into the outside world, because I think that's what's helped me so much during this time, is noticing nature. I mean, I've never in my life not traveled for 5 months, even as a child. And it's incredible, the beauty and the importance and the sustenance of life that I'm getting from watching everything.
Well, and I think that certainly your call to me to notice spiders.
I think nature is having a heyday with COVID. We've got deer sleeping in our yard. We've got raccoons returning to our trash cans. Yep. Bunnies practically jump on top of our feet when we walk in the morning. So I don't know what's going on, but a lot's going on with nature.
Apparently, I have been able to escape seeing the spider world. And
yeah, I see 5 spider webs sitting here right now.
Oh, gosh.
In your office. Is freaking me out. I didn't bring my duster over.
Well, we can address that maybe later. But the reality that marriages have a way of being, and you come to a certain degree of homeostasis. Like, what allows you each to function moderately well with one another? What allows you as a dyad to actually be largely at peace? And those things that have worked in the past, obviously we're saying don't work quite in the way that they once did. But the invitation that you have made for me to see my world, it's a brand new world. And the more I see, I again, yes, there's beauty, but there's also like, I'm supposed to kill spiders now. Apparently, I'm supposed to take them down in my garage office, but nonetheless.
Yeah, let's be on the home front together here.
But I think one of the things that I've utilized to, in so many ways, keep reality at bay is just to be busy. And I think in some ways, this COVID era, I'm busier than I've ever been. More time on Zoom, more meetings, the transition we've had to make as a team from a public presence doing conferences to now a Zoom presence, to be able to do the work that we've done with Story Workshop and the narrative focused trauma care process that we do. And so much work. Yet what I'd also say is there's more time in that I'm not on the road, in planes, airports, or even going to school. And therefore, as a consequence, that sense of, we've got time to sit.
Mm-hmm. Or to walk.
And it's, again, I want to say I bless it. And yet there have been times where I'm aware of the ache to return, not because it was so good, but because it allowed me to survive. And now you and I'm just speaking for me personally, I've got to find new ways of being. And certainly one of those has been, I have found a lot of solace in engaging in conflict, whether it be conflict with you, conflict at school, conflict with being on the road. The intensity of danger and the conflict has almost always been where I've dissipated a lot of my energy. And you're laughing.
I don't know. We're so different that would sort of energize you. It just makes me like, what? I just don't get that, because it kills me when we're in conflict. And I know your colleague, Steve Call, says that's a good thing to have conflict. But when I've disappointed you or been unkind to you, I don't, it depletes me.
Yeah. And so right there, the very core of what often gets said in a very trivial way, opposites attract. And there is a degree to which, and we'll be addressing some of this through the process of our reflection, everyone looks to their partner as a means by which they're going to know something of redemption. But the reality of our past and the structures that have worked in the past are going to play out even with that hope of redemption. And I found so much life, better said, I was able to avoid a kind of death by being in conflict with my mother particularly. And so I'm much more attuned to being in conflict as a means of stepping away from the hardness of life, but also as a way to find a sense of life. And your world couldn't have been more different.
Well, I wouldn't have gone any place near any conflict with my parents. There was no way of winning. Forget that. Their avoidance, disappearance was the only way that I could really have a conflict in my mind, because it never really turned out in my favor if I, stood up for what I wanted, it seemed.
Well, and given the reality that we're together a lot now, and the world is, I think, essentially in some form crumbling with a higher degree of exacerbation of the intensity of all the losses, exhaustion, etc. Things are going to get more dramatic. Even when there's avoidance, it's a more avoidant of a drama. And so I think for us, we've had to step into the debris. We've had to, at different points where I want conflict and you want to escape, we've had to stop and say, there's more going on than just what's happening in this instant between us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And even going back to outdoor visits with our family, I'm serving food and furiously working in the kitchen, and I come out and there's no chair for me to sit. And you're so excited to be able to talk to our children or grandchildren. You don't notice that, oh, maybe Becky needs a chair. And so it's, in some ways, we're just at times more infantile in our awareness of each other's needs. And I think if I've learned anything of these 5 months of being in house arrest with you, honey, it's my tone of voice is so important, so life-giving. And and I didn't grow up with kindness of voice. And it's still an area that I fail often with just my tone of voice. So I need to learn how to ask more kindly when I would like a chair to sit down, because it's a time of excitement when someone comes over. It's different. It's very different now. And so for me to think that you would notice that everyone else was sitting down but me, I just can't go there. It's not going to be helpful. So more forgiveness, more grace.
Yeah. And to underscore, there are, I don't know how to put it better than, there are more failures, and the failures seem smaller, like the chair. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, the weight of that small failure feels so significant. And if I can just take another second on that, it's like time is so distorted for me right now.
Yes.
Like I could not tell you days ago what we did or what happened. Everything seems to melt into this infinite present. Not every day is the same, but pretty much every day is Groundhog Day. And in that broad sense of, I can't really factor in the movement of time, I also feel like there's so many things going on between us that I have to have a kind of wake up Like, are you noticing? That's in part what I was saying about going internal. I've had to be awakened, to be brought back, to have things as simple as, I need a chair, said so that I can engage. And you're right. I have sensed, let's say the majority of times, such grace on your part and kindness, so that the few times that have not been so have been pretty demonstrative and difficult for us to weather through together. But that tone of voice for both of us, and that ability to invite one another back to something of reality in the midst of this really surreal period of time, I don't think we would have had to do that quite the way we did or do now compared to 5 months ago.
Yeah, it's a difficult time. It is. So whether or not we're like not noticing a chair because soon the ferry's going to leave and soon all this is going to end. And, it's that sense of trying to stay balanced when really we know there's so much sorrow circling around so many areas of our lives.
Indeed. And so to be allied is what I hear you saying, is in the small matters. And I think that's been one of the core frameworks that I've had to keep in my heart very clearly. Be faithful in the small. We can't figure out what's going to happen with the Allender Center, with the Seattle School, can't figure out what's going to happen with this conference. Things aren't normal. And can you be faithful with the small? And I guess part of the small, I'm actually looking right now.
Some of the small, like just the spider web.
Yeah, I don't see it. Well, you can point them out to me in a few minutes. But just to say, well, it matters to you to have those destructive little critters that bite you at night taken out of our home. I get it now, more so than ever before. Be faithful in the small, including how tone of voice can shape, in some ways, a significant portion of a day. But that ability to keep coming back and say, look, we need to be armed in arm, literally walking arm in arm. Times where we just need to touch, to just be close, and to be armed in arm, really to do warfare together, because this is a season, I believe evil is so freaking opportunistic to create just small divisions, small hopelessness that's going to grow embryonically to eventually take you to a very deep despair or a deep divide between you and those who matter to you. So being clear of what are the foxes, and that's an image from Song of Songs. What are the foxes that are doing harm to the vineyard that in and of itself are not huge, but eventually over a long season will begin to decimate the beauty and goodness of what you want for you and your partner. So, Becky, before we end, any last things that you want to say people just need to be thinking about during this COVID era?
Well, I'll just speak from my own experience. I've really loved watching each tree get their leaves at different times, and now they're beginning to fall and change. To me, it's just so stabilizing to be in the rhythm of our universe, of the moon, noticing what phase. It's just, it grounds me, and it grounds me just to be with you, walk with you, talk with you, realize what a gift it is to have you in my life as we walk through this season unlike any other.
Yeah, thank you. And for me, to be grounded far more in you, but to also be in this place of saying, this is a new season and I need to learn. And so just literally those times where you've said, we're going to take a walk around our yard, and we're going to do so, and we're not going to come back in the house for about 45 minutes to an hour. I've looked at you with a look like, are you nuts? I know my backyard. I know my front yard. There's nothing to be seen for an hour, but it's been that kind of walk that allows me to see the world the way you see the world and to actually see the world in ways I've not seen it before. So I think there are things we know are so good and true. We have to hold this in the midst of the heartache and complexity of this era. So we're going to be spending more time over the next number of weeks, inviting you to consider what it means to grow your marriage in this time.
And I just wanted to say, too, I think the absence of what we've said about praying together and reading scripture is unusual that we didn't mention those, but certainly that's been very grounding and very life-giving to both of us to share where God has been leading us in the scriptures and also to pray, because we have a lot. We have more than we've ever had to pray about now.
Yeah. Well, we'll engage that further when we begin to talk about what are the triggers that indeed keep us from being able to grow together, and what are the rituals that we need to praise and grow in, and eventually we're going to be talking particularly what do singles engage in marriage with their friends bring, and what do they learn from watching us as married couples. So as we go through this process, we're inviting you to think very deeply about your marriage, about the marriage of those whom you love, and what it means to, in this radically difficult season, praise and glory in the one that you have been given. We hope this episode has been helpful. And if you would like to engage your marriage in other ways than this podcast, we'd love to be an ally with you. And one of the ways we're doing so is inviting you to a marriage conference that Kathy Lurzell and I will be teaching on October 10th. It's to awaken your heart to the longings that existed in your relationship and are meant to grow through your relationship.
And also, there's a marriage online course that launches October 13th. I'm just so proud of you and the team, and all the work that went into this course will help you discover how your personal stories shape your marriage story and find hopeful pathways forward, meaning to become even more intimate and more loving and kinder to yourself and to your spouse, and therefore to your marriage.
And finally, we've got date nights, which I don't know if we've ever had a date night, but we are part of a date night series where we're going to invite couples to an experience of reflection on their marriage in a more playful and engaging way, where you get to celebrate your relationship in greater gratitude and play. And look, all of these can be purchased separately, or you can bundle them together and get the conference for free. So go to theallendercenter.org/marriage to find out more about all three of these offerings.
The Allender Center podcast is produced by the Seattle School of Theology and Psychology.
If you'd like more information about the Allender Center, you can look at theallendercenter.org.